Welcome, Broncos fans. We are your hosts, Ron White and Thomas Hall, and this is the Orange and Blue View podcast. And it's a show that brings two different perspectives on the latest Denver Broncos happenings in our united desire to bring you more Broncos knowledge. And we're a live show, so we welcome you to add your perspective into the chat on all things Broncos, and we will read those comments when they come up if we can. So today we'll be talking about the Sean Payton and Drew Brees connection and what that means for Russell Wilson. So we're going to dive into that and we're going to look into the chat. So Ron, what do you think? We'll get started right away. We'll just jump into it. You know, we've had some people out there talking about how Drew Brees was a great quarterback and Sean Payton was along for the ride. My perspective is a little different than that, and I'd like to hear your perspective, what you think Sean Payton was able to do for Drew Brees, and then we'll get into what you think he might be able to do for Russell Wilson.
Sure. So I think Sean Payton was able to mold Drew Brees to the scheme of his preference, right? Being able, so Drew Brees, obviously, we know wasn't the typical running quarterback. He was more of a pocket passer. So Sean Payton was able to develop scheme, develop play calls based on what Drew Brees can do best. And we already know, Thomas, right, that Sean Payton went on Colin Cowherd and he provided us insight on if he were the Denver Broncos head coach, right, he was able to provide us what he can do for Russell Wilson. And he was able to say that he wanted the greatest lyrics of Russell Wilson to have some mock-ups of what Russell Wilson can do, right? A lot of the off-script things that Russell Wilson can do, and tailor his offense to what Russell Wilson does best, which is escape the pocket on the run, be able to make plays down the field. And I think Sean Payton, with his scheme, can tailor his offense based on what Russell Wilson can do best. Obviously, we know that there are design runs that will happen, running the ball effectively. But I think what Sean Payton or what we're able to do from the Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram tandem, and of the Michael Thomas, the players on that offense were able to thrive based on what Sean Payton has. And I think the same thing can be true for the Denver Broncos offense if he would become our head coach. Being able, once Javonte Williams gets back, being able to do design runs with Russell Wilson and Javonte Williams, and then having Russell Wilson off script be able to do things down the field.
Absolutely. When I look at what happened with Brees and when he went from San Diego to New Orleans, obviously he had a good season in San Diego, so he had the talent. But what I noticed, I think, is that it was an offense that fit him better. I mean, Schottenheimer, Cameron offense was Air Coryell days, and it's a little more old school. You get into the West Coast offense with more advanced principles, which I think fit Drew Brees. But even more so than that, I mean, that's just a kind of a low level, high level argument. When you look at what he did, he saw that Drew Brees was an excellent timing passer. So, West Coast obviously goes, yards after catch is important in that timing. But he also saw that he was a high completion percentage type thrower. So he gave him higher volume of throws. So he took that game and his Drew Brees' game and amped it up to the 11th, amped it up to 11, so to speak, from Spinal Tap. He let him pass more for those things, and he led the league in completions or attempts and completion percentage for several years while he was in New Orleans. So it's one of those things where you look at Sean Payton and you say he's got the mind that he can mold the offense that fits the strengths. He also helped, Jameis Winston. He helped others, Teddy Bridgewater to be their best. That's what gives me hope if he gets hired as the Broncos head coach, right? So that gives me hope that he can help Russell Wilson. Obviously, Hackett did not. So what's your take on what you saw when Payton was there with the quarterbacks that he had? Do you think it was all his offensive scheme, or do you think he's got a little bit of molding ability that we saw, a little bit differences in the offense for who he had throwing the ball?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of. I think it's more molding ability. You're able to, as an offensive coordinator or a head coach, right? Whoever's calling the plays, they're able to have a foundational offense, right, of a set number of plays that they can do, and then they mold their offense. They adjust their offense based on what the quarterback can do well. So I think in the case of Russell Wilson, you will see a lot of design runs, right? They're very similar to what we see in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. Design runs and obviously getting out of the pocket, scrolling right, scrambling left, and then pushing the ball down the field and able to see exactly who can, catch those passes down the field. I think Sean Payton can really draw up some plays based on Russell Wilson's skill set from that perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I hope they don't make him run too much. I mean, I know that he used to be a running quarterback. He is getting a little older now. I think the injuries could pile up. I agree with you that you got to move him around a little bit, get him, outside the pocket a little bit more. And that's where I think the running game from like a San Francisco 49ers style, where, you really rely on that running game to set up bootlegs and things like that. But I don't want him running too much. He's going to be 34 pretty soon. If you want to keep him healthy for a few years, I hope there's not too many design runs, but opportunistic runs for sure. I wouldn't want to run him like they're running Hurts, obviously, because the injuries can happen, and he's getting paid a lot of money. I don't want him just back there pocket passing either, for sure. But you brought up a good point. It's I don't worry too much about Sean Payton, but who's the offensive coordinator he's going to bring with him? That's a question. I mean, I know Payton really kind of handles most of that stuff, but his Carmichael's still there at the Saints. So who is he going to bring with him to kind of help that offense out? As far as the quarterback's coach, I mean, I don't know if he'll keep Clint Kubiak, but he's going to bring in his own guys. So wonder who do you want him to bring, and then maybe who do we think he's going to bring?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. I would maybe think about bringing in a Joe Lombardi, who was just recently relieved of his duties from the Los Angeles Chargers. I know they have some connections from crossing paths before, and what Joe Lombardi was able to do with Justin Herbert, I think, would help Russell Wilson with this offense. There's some others, folks maybe that Sean Payton may think about doing, but I think on my list, at least top on my list, would be Joe Lombardi. Okay. And then Frank Wright is also another, resource that can help with Russell Wilson's development. We've seen what Frank Wright did with Indy. Although the quarterback situation in Indy wasn't ideal when Frank Wright was head coach, but being able to develop plays based on Russell Wilson's strength, I would see Frank Wright also being a viable candidate for that OC job.
Yeah, I think Frank Reich would come in if someone like Jim Caldwell, because they have a lot of history. I mean, I think Lombardi has history with Payton, but not so much Frank Reich. Deanna Hendry, we appreciate coming in here with a super chat. Thank you so much. Her comment is, "Good afternoon, Thomas and Ron. Hopefully we secure Payton. I'm stoked for next year. Wilson will thrive under Payton. I have faith in both. Mile High Huddle for life, orange and blue." We appreciate that. Thank you so much coming in with that super chat. Appreciate it. And thanks for joining the chat. I mean, this is a live chat. So, I mean, obviously we want you to come in here with your comments so we can get a different perspective, not just our two perspectives. And don't forget to like the show, and also follow Ron on Twitter and myself at Thomas Hall NFL and on Twitter, so you can get more insights as we go along. So we are talking about Sean Payton, and we just got into this. Who do you think he'll bring with him as an offensive coordinator? And Frank Reich is a good name. It's an intriguing name who I would look for if it ended up being Caldwell. I don't know I don't know if there's a history that I think he's a great choice as offensive coordinator. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, which he might get a head coaching job. He's interviewed. I think they should have interviewed him for the head coaching job. My only concern is, do they, the Broncos didn't seem to have any interest in him. So I don't know if that's going to come to fruition. But who I like, someone kind of a surprise, is the 49ers I think it's the running game coordinator, Slowick. I think that's his name. And I'm going to look it up right now to make sure I am. Yeah, Bobby Slowick. He's the passing game coordinator. I like that. If you want to go and grab somebody that, knows the West Coast offense, has had experience under a very talented coach, and you want to bring somebody new in. If he wants to bring somebody new in, that's someone I would look to. And then the other one is the quarterback's coach from Cincinnati Bengals. I liked him. I think he's done wonders with Joe Burrow. He might be a candidate. The thing, I just don't know if Payton's gonna try and grab somebody he's super familiar with, and you might be right with the Joe Lombardi for sure.
Yeah, and I think with that one, Thomas, the passing coordinator for the Bengals, it depends on, I know Brian Callahan is interviewing for jobs as well, right?
Absolutely.
So for that, does he bring in that QB quarterbacks coach from an OC perspective? And it would also be fascinating if Sean Payton doesn't work out, we were to get DeMeco Ryan as our head coach, and he can bring in that OC from the San Francisco 49ers to help with Russ. So that'll be interesting. That's intriguing.
Yeah, I with Ryan's, it scares me a little bit if he brings in somebody brand new, someone that hasn't done offensive coordinator before, because he's a defensive mind. He can, he'll probably stick with Evero is my guess. Maybe not, but he needs to. I think he might want to. I think he might want to think about bringing in a more experienced offensive coordinator, somebody who's done it before, to help him, because he's not been a head coach before, and he's a great coach. He's going to be he's going to get his shot, but he has limited experience, and he has experience with only one coach. So there's not a lot of something to pull from. But yeah, that would be interesting. The one thing I just want to, before we go on and get off move on to the next topic, we're still talking a little bit about what Payton can do for Drew Brees. And I just want to give one little piece of history. Sean Payton is from the offensive coaching tree of Jim Fassel. And Jim Fassel was an good offensive mind, and he was the offensive coordinator under Wade Phillips with the Broncos in 1993. And that was the turning point for John Elway. And from a statistical perspective, when he became a good quarterback statistically, he was always very talented. But that gives me a little bit, I kind of feel like there's a little nostalgia there. And what he can, what he did, what Fassel did, and then Shanahan carried on, both similar type offenses. So, having Sean Payton with that, kind of lineage makes me feel good about if he takes the coaching job. And I do still talk about the character issues a little bit, but if he does get the job, I always like that nostalgia a little bit. So if he can turn, if that lineage really got John Elway over the hump, I think it can work for Russell Wilson.
Yes, definitely. I definitely agree with you there.
And the other one we talked about is Jim Caldwell. We talked about him as a candidate, but who we haven't talked about on the show? We kind of missed him last time. I've missed him before. Raheem Morris. He's still in the running too, and that's another candidate that they're not just I don't think they're just giving him an interview to give him an interview. They think he's going to be a good coach on his next go around, so to speak. How do you feel about Raheem Morris?
For me, so Raheem Morris does definitely have some skin in the game. He's very talented, and what he was able to do with the Rams defense, right, the past few years has been impressive. But I think for me, he doesn't really move the needle for a Broncos head coach position. Right now, what we're seeing from DeMeco Ryan the past few years, Thomas, right, has been nothing short of spectacular. And if they were to go with another first-time defensive-minded person, my preference would be D'Amico Ryan. Now, obviously, it depends on who he would bring in to surround him, right, from a head of coaching perspective, who he brings in as his OC, if he were to keep Evero or if he were to bring in someone new, that's up on the table. But um, for this position, I don't think D'Amico Ryan, in my opinion, moves the needle too much. But yeah, definitely, I'm a more of a D'Amico Ryan fan, and then depending on who they bring in as the OC to help Russell Wilson out would be paramount. So
I'm not a huge fan of Raheem Morris, but I think he got I think he got a shot way too early.
mhm.
His first time as a head coach, he was very, very young. Uh, and he may have learned from that experience, right? So you can't. And then he was an interim too at the Falcons, I believe, for a short time. So he's got experience. Raheem Morris has head coaching NFL experience, and it is possible that he learned from his mistakes the first time around. So he might be a viable candidate that they fall back on. I mean, if they decide that they're not going to trade for Sean Payton, or New Orleans asks for an extreme amount of picks, they may have to go with the next option down. And if they want experience, the people left are Dan Quinn, Jim Caldwell, and Raheem Morris. So I wouldn't discount Raheem Morris as a candidate. He's one of those types that got a shot, did okay, not great, but he may have learned from that experience, and he may be a pretty good coach.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts, Thomas, on another candidate that's out there, David Shaw. So he's
Yeah,
been in the interview as well. So what are your thoughts there on maybe David Shaw being the next head coach of the Denver Broncos?
yeah, I have some reservations about David Shaw. Good guy. He has a pretty decent college track record. He has NFL assistant coach experience. So he does have some experience, more so than somebody that's coming in fresh from a coordinator. But my problem with him, there's two problems I have. One, I think he got the interview mostly because of his relationship with the Denver Broncos ownership, who that to me is a red flag. And then second of all, he took over for Jim Harbaugh at Stanford, and that program slowly deteriorated. Yeah, he had some success early on, and then he had a couple bowl games a few years after that, but then it just kind of went downhill. So was that David Shaw? What was it? Something else? I don't know, but he's the head coach responsible for that program. So I'm iffy on David Shaw. If you're going to go with experience, go with NFL coaching experience maybe over David Shaw. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree to an extent. I think what they did with David Shaw was more of a lure to try to bring in Jim Harbaugh. And I think the plan for the Denver Broncos was, I really believe that the plan was Jim Harbaugh as their priority, their top on the board, Denver Broncos head coach. And to bring in David Shaw for an interview was to maybe lure Jim Harbaugh to have David Shaw be the OC. But now that Jim Harbaugh is out, it's Jim Harbaugh. I'm sorry, uh, David Shaw being the main candidate as a head coach. I'm not on board with that. I don't think that David Shaw really possesses. I know what he did with Stanford, which was great, but I don't know if this is enough needed to turn this franchise around, which causes my reservation. But we will see. Depending on who the next head coach is, I know there's some familiarity with Sean Payton and David Shaw. Maybe if it is D'Amico Ryan, he may bring in David Shaw as his OC. We'll just have to see. But as a head coach candidate, he doesn't move the needle for me.
All right. Yeah. I mean, we're both on the same page there. I don't want to knock him. He seems like a good coach, but you're right. For the Broncos, we need to see something a little bit more. I don't care about the splash. I don't want to be like a big headline. I want somebody to come in who is different than what we've seen and can bring the team together and create that winning culture, right? And that takes experience, and that's why I think that the ownership is leaning away from these non-experienced guys, because and I've even talked about even getting rid of some of the players that would be a surprise, because all they know is losing, right? So there's players that have been here that all they know is missing the playoffs and having a losing record. And you can't clean all of the, house totally, but there is a culture here that needs to be changed in Mile High City. It has to be changed, and somebody has to come in and do it. And that's why I think, someone, and I'm not a huge Dan Quinn fan. I'm not a huge Dan Quinn fan at all. And I'm not going to, be on the bandwagon for him, but like a lot of people out there. But he established a winning culture in Atlanta, and he made some mistakes, and then he got let go because of those mistakes. But he established a culture there, a winning culture. He's kind of he seemed like he made some good moves. He just had a couple mistakes that really cost him. And Dan Quinn, if he can learn from those mistakes, and that's what I always say, second time around, did they learn from the mistakes? I think he would be a good coach, even if he didn't learn from his mistakes. He's going to be a solid coach. If he learned from those mistakes, he's going to be an excellent coach. That's my opinion on Dan Quinn. And we'll see, because he is going to be a head coach again. So we'll see what happens. Might be in the Mile High City, might not. But we got Pete. Oh, go ahead.
And if you're looking for a high floor, low ceiling guy, Dan Quinn's your guy, right? I think with the Broncos, and to your point, Thomas, it's not only a coach that can come in with some experience, but a coach whose players are excited, who are eager to play the game for them. What you see on the 49ers sideline with DeMeco Ryan. The defense is so excited, so eager to play defense for their defensive coordinator. And to have that person come in to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos, looking up to their head coach. And not only that, of course, the DeMeco Ryans will have that experience as well from a leadership perspective. Having the players play for him would just be tremendous. And of course, that would get the players up and prepared for games, right? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for players to come in, we'll play our current players, right? Justin Simmons, PS2, right? The whole offense as well. Coming in and just being ready, being amped up to play for their head coach and play for games. And I think these past 6 or 7 years, that's what's been missing. So, it really depends on who they come in. Obviously, Payton is the one. But if he were to come with some sort of consolation prize, DeMeco Ryan would be that consolation prize for this team.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a lot higher on DeMeco Ryans than I am. I like him. I think he's I think he is, obviously people love playing for him. I just, his experience level right now is concerning for me. And his, we don't know if he has an eye for assistant coaching talent. Like, is he going to bring in the right coordinators? Those are the two big questions for me on Ryans. I mean, if this was the Broncos' first go around after Kubiak left, sure. But after 3 times of trying, they've missed. They need to get something turned around. And, people talk about John Fox coming in, stabilizing the team. He didn't have what it took to get him over the top. So they brought in Kubiak. A lot of that, that there's a lot of truth to that. So bringing in somebody who can get the team into a winning culture, winning mindset, that's what it takes. And, I just don't know if Ryans has enough. I think Caldwell does. I think Caldwell and Quinn both do. But like you said, they're kind of boring. It's like, where's the big splash? Where's the big name? I mean, Payton's the only one left, but they're not bad coaches. And so I want to rank Ryans high, on this list just because of the things you said. I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
Yeah. And understood. I mean, I think with Ryans, it's, I see what I see on the San Francisco 49ers, and, we've been bitten with the bug on the first-time head coaches. So I think that what's drawing people away from the first-time folks. But I really think, Thomas, this time, DeMeco Ryan, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, some sources out in the league, I really think D'Amico Ryans is going to be a great first-time head coach. Now, again, we have to see who he surrounds around him, right? We have to see exactly who he brings in as his OC. If he keeps in Evero as his DC, or if D'Amico Ryans is going to call the defense on his own, the special teams coordinator. So that there's a lot to still be decided, but yeah, I think D'Amico Ryans does bring excitement if Sean Payton isn't the choice. If he decides to go back to Fox, if he decides to not go in this coaching cycle, D'Amico Ryans would definitely be a great consolation prize on this squad. So,
Yeah, well, we've got Jeremy Shawn. He's coming in with a comment. The stuff you
thank you,
hear,
Jeremy.
thanks, Jeremy. The stuff you hear from players about Ryan's is stuff I've never heard before. Ridiculous respect, and that's just what you're talking about. And that's what it takes. Definitely, as a head
Yes.
coach, you've got to have respect in that locker room. But it goes more than that, right? I mean, the people respected Hackett. It seems like the players came out and said they had a lot of respect for Hackett, but there was a lot that was missing from his ability to put his strategy out on the field.
Yes.
But Ryan's, he's been there. He's called the defensive plays. Like Hackett wasn't really calling the plays too much in Green Bay. So, there was a little bit of that. I think Ryan's is a different has a different mindset, I would say, than Hackett. Hackett was wanted to be liked, and respect and like is different. I think Ryan's is a little bit more, maybe a little more tough love and tell people what they need to hear, where Hackett was just kind of buddy with them, So there is something to be said. And, I mean, I've been a Broncos fan for a long time. And when they hired Dan Reeves, it was an excellent hire, right? Young guy coming in from a coordinator from a winning culture, from that Landry coaching tree, which goes all the way back to how, they were winners. And he came in as a young coach and really turned it around. He had some help. He got a good owner, and he got a Hall of Fame quarterback. So that definitely helped. So I would really hate to see the Broncos pass up somebody that turns into a great coach for a long time to go with an older person like Jim Caldwell, who can be here for a short time, but turn it around and then they're back to where they were. So, I mean, it's always that buyer's remorse, maybe, or the one that got away kind of thing that does trouble me a little bit with, me not liking Ryan's as high, but the team needs a change, needs something different for sure. Absolutely. For sure. So, but let's talk a little bit about some chat that's going on. They're talking about the pay that's going to require. I don't really care about the pay. If the ownership wants to pay Payton a lot of money, pay him a lot of money. It doesn't come out of the salary cap. It doesn't affect the team, if they've got the money to do it. But what I am concerned about is the draft capital that will take to get him. Now that has been, I've heard, between 1 first rounder to 2 first rounders and 2 second rounders. We've talked about this for a little bit. What's your feeling on what do you think it will take, and what's too much? What is too much?
Well, to start with the last question, what's too much? Too much would be 1 first round. Well, 2 or 3 first rounders would be too much, right? I think 1 first rounder does it for me. We can deal with 1 first rounder, but if you're asking 2 first rounders, that's too much. It depends on where in the draft that you're looking for. If it's 2, if it's a second round and third round, we maybe can get with a third round pick. Maybe in a later year, I'm okay with that. But anything more than a first round pick, Thomas, is too much for me. It's too rich.
Okay.
And obviously there are other candidates out there that would serve, would be just as great at the job as Sean Payton. I know we're all on the same wavelength of having Sean Payton because of his offensive prowess to help Russell Wilson out, but there are other coaches out there, depending on what they have at OC, that can definitely do the job just as well, if not better. But anything more than a first round pick is just too rich for my blood.
All right. Well, let's talk about this then. All right. So say they do trade for Sean Payton, and we all expect that coaching hire would turn the franchise around.
Mhm.
They'd be a contender. So So say they go to the playoffs with Sean Payton. Let's just say they do. And they traded 2 first-round picks for him. So I built a draft trade calculator based on the last 12 drafts. The probability of those 2 picks hitting an impact player is under 50%, just under. It's basically 50%. They have a 50-50 chance of hitting one impact player with those 2 picks. That is a coin flip. So if you are absolutely certain Sean Payton's your guy, 2 first-round draft picks may not pan out. One of them might have, but both of them probably won't. I mean, I know Payton's a great drafter, so to speak, but he missed on Benito. So I'm just saying you got to consider that draft. The draft is a crapshoot, and I know that they are the experts in their field, but if you look at the history of the draft, everybody misses, and most of them, even in the first round, it's a 50-50 chance. In that late in the first round, two later round draft choices. Now, if you add 2 second rounds to that, I'll tell you what that is. I'm calculating it right now.
Okay.
It is 0.65%. That's the probability of getting an impact player. So you trade all of that, and you're still not. It's still not a done deal that you're going to get 4 great players in the draft. So if you're going to have someone for a long time, then you may that may be something you consider. Like, give the capital up that you need to give up and go for it.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying there. I definitely understand. I think it just really depends on if they prioritize the head coach, Sean Payton, as a high priority than an offensive lineman, right? And it really depends on what the Broncos do with, or they plan to do with, that pick. Now, as we see the current roster for the Denver Broncos, it's we're pretty much set mostly at most of the skill positions. Of course, we can always fill in depending on what some of the players, and strengthen up and beef up some of the positions, like inside linebacker, maybe in the secondary we can get a corner, of obviously offensive line, but it really depends on what and then where, right? If it's a 2023, maybe it's another draft, another year that we look at. But we don't want to compromise too much within the near future this year for 2023 to get Sean Payton when there are other candidates that are out there. At least that's my opinion. Now, we have all the money in the world, right? We have the richest owner in the NFL. So, with that, if we can just maybe do a first round pick, right? I know San Francisco, we have San Francisco's pick essentially. So it'll be a later round pick.
Might be number 30, number 32. Who knows?
Number 30, it might be number 32, right? Depending on how this goes. So it might be number 32, and we throw, and maybe another mid-round pick, or maybe a player with all the cash.
Yeah.
Right. So it really just depends on what the Saints, Mickey Loomis, are looking for, and we're able to deal. But in my mind, Thomas, it's more than the first round. The first round is just a little bit more valuable to me. And if you're asking for more than 2 first round picks, that's just too much. That's just too rich for me. But the later rounds we can definitely examine depending on what the Saints want to do. And then I could, obviously throwing some money at them as well.
Yeah, I mean, we got Garth Knight coming in.
Thank you, Garth.
Appreciate it, Garth, with a super chat. We really, really like to see those with a comment. He says, "Gentlemen, this is my first time catching this Saturday show. Thanks for the work." Well, you're welcome, Garth. We put in a lot of work. We try to make sure we are, knowledgeable on what's going on out there. We do a lot of digging. Ron's a big film guy. He digs in, looks at the scheme, looks at the players. I like to weave in a lot of analysis and some history here and there just for fun. So it's going to be a fun show once we get going. It's only our 3rd show. So I appreciate the comment, and we look forward to you being on here and bringing more comments to the show. So here's the thing. when it comes to what's being said out there. You've got Sean Payton. He's trying to, get back into the coaching game. So of course he's going to be like, "Oh, I think I'm only worth a first round pick," But then you have the Saints who are saying, "No, we're not going to give him away." So you've got both ends of the spectrum. The one thing that's going for the Broncos, if they do decide on Payton, is I believe the New Orleans Saints don't have a first round pick this year. I think they gave it up. So they want a first round pick. So if it comes down to them just getting a first round pick because they want it, there's a little bit of leverage there, but they don't have a lot of leverage. The Saints have most of the leverage because they don't care. They have their head coach. Sean Payton jumped ship, left them high and dry. Why would they want to help another team out? With letting just a late, it could be one pick before the second round for a coach that they have under contract just to help out another team or help him out. I know he put in time there, but he's still under contract. So why would they want to give him up for nothing? That's a good question. Maybe you have some insight on that, Ron.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily get him up for nothing. I think what the Saints will do is that they will be able to play ball and do what's in the best interest of the team and Sean Payton. I think they will look out for their guy, right? And they were able to, Sean Payton was able to give them a Super Bowl. So I think with that, Thomas, that they will do right with Sean Payton. And it really just depends on if Sean Payton wants to take this job. That's really what it's dependent on. If Sean Payton doesn't see any more there in Russell Wilson, any hope for the future for the Broncos, then I don't see Sean Payton willing to take this job. And then, the Saints may not pay as much hardball, and maybe depending on what Sean Payton wants to do after this season, they may try to play there. But it really just comes down to what Sean Payton wants to do this year. And I think really if Sean Payton wants the Broncos, the Saints will play ball and they will do right by their former head coach.
Well, let's hope so. It's obvious that Payton is intrigued by the Broncos. He's taken a couple interviews, but it seems like he's kind of locked in. So I don't think there's a much convincing has to go on for Payton to want this job. It's a great ownership, a great location, great city. They're already putting money into the stadium. There's a lot to like. And if he could come back to the coaching ranks and turn Russell Wilson around, I don't think Russell Wilson's broken. I think he had a rough time with the offense. I don't think it's going to take a whole lot to get him back to a respectable quarterback. But if he can turn that around, turn this franchise back into what it was, that's a Hall of Fame resume right there. Even if he doesn't win another Super Bowl, but if he goes out and does another Super Bowl without Drew Brees, comes in here. He's a Hall of Fame coach for sure. He probably is already, but that's going to solidify that. So, you go out and you do what it takes. And I think it's somewhere between what the Saints said and what Sean Payton said. It's probably a first rounder. It's probably a second rounder, maybe next year. It's somewhere in there, and maybe a later pick. I don't know what players they would give up. There's been no rumors about what players would go and who the Saints really are would be targeting in that. So, who is, in your mind, who is untradeable in that deal? What player is untradeable to get a head coach like Sean Payton?
Yeah, it really depends on the question of who has value on the Denver Broncos. We can say there are a few defensive pieces. Obviously, Justin Simmons, although he may be talked about in this trade, but that definitely not PS2. And then on the offensive side, we would love to keep Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy. Sutton may be a part of this package, but definitely Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, we've seen what we know from the Greg Dulcich. Now, some of the other tight ends and some of the later rounds on the wide receiver, maybe a KJ Hamler can go. But definitely we want to keep our foundational portions on the offense and defensive side.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I there's only one player on this team that is untradeable in my mind, and that's I mean, if you take out contracts and dead money and stuff like that, it's Pat Surtain.
Patterson,
He is all pro. He's if his trajectory keeps going, he's a Hall of Famer in my mind. You don't trade somebody like that that's going into their prime. And he's got another 7, 8, maybe 10 years of high caliber play. After that, there's nobody untouchable on this roster. I mean, there's good players. There's not great players. And I love Cortland Sutton and I love Justin Simmons. But in my mind, anybody is fair game on this roster. Anybody except Surtain. And that's just because of his trajectory. I mean, it would be a shame to see that go somewhere else. I mean, that's like when the Broncos stole Champ Bailey in his prime from the Redskins and came here and had a Hall of Fame career. So you don't send him packing. Anybody else, I would throw him in if that's what it took.
Yeah, and I definitely see what you're saying. And the ability for Patrick Surtain to just nullify the number one receiver on the opposing team's offense, it's just mind-boggling. So I would definitely not trade Patrick Surtain at all. Again, there are other hometown heroes, as you will. Again, the Justin Simmons and the Cortland Sutton, the folks that have been drafted by the Broncos that I wouldn't say are untouchable. I know that are near and dear to Broncos country's hearts. But it's one of those things where, if we were to get a guy like Sean Payton to help this offense, this starving franchise for a while, then those would be some of the other folks that we maybe have to consider putting as a part of that trade deal. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in the chat if you can trade players for coaches. I don't know. I think you can, but I would need to look that up. I thought you could, but I could be mistaken. I have been mistaken in the past. But whatever compensation they want to come up with is, I think on the table. It can be money. I think it can be players. But if it's not, then you don't trade the players. You give up a couple first round draft choices, and you dust off your hands. So I appreciate George coming in from Facebook.
Thank you, George.
With that comment. I believe you can, but I will research that just to make sure. I don't know all the rules when it comes to the NFL. They've got a very long list of pages in their rule book to go through. So I'll have to check that out. But but even so, George Payton has no problem trading away hometown heroes. Trade away Von Miller. He has no problem with it. He has no problem with trading high round picks. He got rid of Bradley Chubb, which was fine. For the contract that he got, injury prone player, but he has no problem. I mean, and I don't think the ownership will as well. And I know that people like Justin Simmons, and I like him too. But he's expendable. Brandon McManus, the holdover from Super Bowl 50 on this roster, he's expendable. Everybody except PS2, I think. So make the deal. If Payton is the coach, make the deal. Get it done. It's got to be somewhere between the high end and the low end. It's probably going to be 2 to 3 picks, most likely. Deanna, thank you again. Coming back in with another super chat with a comment, and I will read it. And we appreciate it. This is what helps us keep this going as we start to build this podcast and get our wings under us, so to speak. Her comment is, no, you can't trade players for a head coach. It's all speculation. Only owners know how much is too much. Have to look at the head coach position logically and not emotionally. Well, I think you're right, Deanna. You got to take emotion out of it, and you got to take out relationships as well. That's why I think David Shaw should be scratched right away from the list. Take out the relationships, do what's right for the program. And that is hiring the best person for the job based on your interview process.
Yes, and thank you, Deanna, for the super chat. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. And yeah, I agree. Right, you have to take the emotion out of this. Think logically. You have to think about what head coach works best for the players on the team. what head coach you think can turn Russell around, and what head coach that has a lot of skins in the wall that can help you win games. So again, there are a lot of different factors that come into play. Obviously, how they interview, what do they see as they of this franchise, of this offense, who are they thinking about bringing in as the staff? So there are a lot of different key factors that come into play when it comes to a whole head coach hire. So yeah, I definitely agree with your comment here. And again, thank you very much for your super chat. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Take the emotion out. Go follow your process. These
Yes.
people are smart people that are running this Broncos organization, and you follow your process. If you have a good process, follow it to the end. Don't second guess yourself. Do what you want, what you think is the best, and go do it. Pull the trigger. Don't worry about the draft picks, because if a coach is going to be here 10 years, those are going to go away, and you're going to you hopefully have a winning program for, the few years after that. And you look at all these big trades, Herschel Walker trade, the biggest one that you can imagine. They were in the playoffs for several years. Even after that, even after Herschel Walker was gone from the team, they were still in the playoffs. So, you can get around it. Gary Palmer, man, appreciate it. Gary
Thanks,
Palmer
Gary.
coming in with a super chat, longtime Mile High Huddle commenter, listener. We love seeing you here. And his comment is, "Good evening, Thomas, Ron, and Scott. Good luck with your show." Well, thank you for that.
Thank you
It
very
is,
much.
yeah,
Appreciate that.
we really hope to get this thing rolling. It's like I said, it's our third show. We're still getting the hang of it here, but we are going to bring some different perspectives and some in-depth knowledge, especially when the games start to roll around. We're going to be the preview before the games next season. So by then, hopefully we'll have a large fan base ready to hear our takes right before the game. So appreciate that, Gary. All right. We got a few more minutes here before we get going. So let's talk about something as maybe not compensation for Gary Payton, but we start talking about trading players. Now, who do you think, Ron? I mean, we're looking at some holes in this Broncos roster, right? And if we can, watch them do some sort of trading of players, what do you think some of these players we mentioned will get for the Broncos in youth movement, so to speak? So we have Justin Simmons. We talked about him. Tell me what you think his value is, and if it is worth it, even if it's not for a coach. Say it's just trading him away to get a player or a draft pick.
Yeah, but Justin Simmons has high value, especially after this season. I mean, he has I don't know the number of interceptions off the top of my head, but he has numerous interceptions this season.
6.
And this was when he was out for a few games.
Yep.
So we can say that Justin Simmons has high value. And if there were a trade that were to happen with him, I think, his value would be high and good for the other team. For Courtland Sutton, maybe the value isn't as high. And I'm only thinking about Thomas of this past season. We were able to see Jerry Jeudy shine, the rookie Dulcich shine on the receiving front, and Sutton had a bit of a quiet year. So, that's not to say that next season will be quiet or, he's going to dim in the limelight, but I don't know for Courtland Sutton, and I think it just may be something within. It may be something mental with him that he may just needs to get figured out. But I think if we have, as far as the value, him leaving, I think he would have maybe some value on the other team as well. It just really depends on, kind of what the other folks do as well. We also have to think about when the team gets back healthy, right? So when this 2023 offense rolls on the field with Javonte Williams, although he may not be 100%. Obviously, he has, with the ACL, MCL, there's a lot of things going on right there with his injury. But with him, a healthy Tim Patrick, some more offensive linemen healthy. And on the defensive front, we just haven't seen that yet. So it really depends on how they come back healthy. And with the healthy team, I think this team can definitely go far. So,
all right. Garth Knight coming back in with another super chat. Get your comments read. Thank you for that. I appreciate you coming in with the super chat. Ron and I both appreciate it. Garth says, TNR, which is us, if Sean Payton is off the board, who is your number one hire? Mine is Caldwell. That's a great question, Garth, because we have been spitballing who it would be, because Payton is the number one. I think Ron, and I don't want to speak for you, said Ryans, but go ahead. Is that your number two? Ryans, D'Amico Ryans.
Yes, D'Amico Ryans is my number two. Definitely. And really, Garth, and again, Garth, thank you. It really depends on, again, he's my number two, but it's really going to be contingent upon who he brings in around him, just to help steer the ship. We've had on many podcasts two number one priorities, essentially. Fix Russ, offensive line. So it's paramount that D'Amico Ryan gets the correct OC to help him fix Russ, the number one priority. And then second, hire the correct offensive line coach to help turn this offensive line around. Again, on the offensive line, you do have maybe one or two players that can stay. Obviously, Miners, Bowles coming to mind. But, there are a lot of other players that could definitely be replaceable. So really just getting that coach to come in, replace those players, implement their scheme would definitely help. But yeah, definitely D'Amico Ryan is my number two. Garth, I know I went on a tangent, but just as an FYI.
So Garth, I'll tell you, I agree with you. Caldwell is mine, and it's weird to say that. I was a huge Harbaugh guy from the beginning. I wanted him here, but I'm a fan of Caldwell for one reason. Well, actually, two reasons, but I'm going to give you my one reason. I think he'll bring Frank Reich with him as the offensive coordinator. Now, if Frank Reich gets hired, then he can't do that. But I think if Frank Reich gets passed over, he's going to be looking for offensive coordinator job. I think Jim Caldwell would bring him along as offensive coordinator. And I actually had Frank Reich as a high priority for the Broncos to interview because I liked what he did. I think he's an excellent coach in a bad situation in Indianapolis. He made do with, a rough go there after, especially after, now I'm drawing a blank on his name. I do this all the time. Why am I drawing a blank on the quarterback's name when he retired all of a sudden? He actually made do with quarterbacks that were either aging or weren't that great, and an ownership that's Irsay is tough to deal with. I think if he brought him as an offensive coordinator, they would have an excellent offense to pair with a defense that's already solid that would be more opportunistic now that they had a lead. So that's the knock I have on Evero's defense was they didn't get enough. They didn't get takeaways.
Yes.
Yeah. Luck. Andrew Luck. Sorry. Thank you for putting that in the chat. Andrew Luck. Why was I drawing a blank on that? It's nuts. Must be my age. But that's my number two guy, even though I think Quinn in the long run might be a better hire. For over the next 15 years, Quinn might be the better hire. But I think if you bring in Reich with Caldwell will step down over a few years, and then you got Reich kind of stepping into that role. I like Frank Reich. I don't know why they're not interviewing him. So yeah, I'm with you, Garth, and thank you for the super chat. It goes for me. It definitely goes Payton, then Caldwell, and then probably Quinn, and then Ryans.
Yeah, and Scott brings up here, different starter in Indy, right? Every year since then, right? So it's what Frank Reich was able to do with different starting quarterbacks, aging quarterbacks, and to implement that philosophy in Denver. It's just such a shame that Denver didn't consider him to interview for the head coach job, because I thought he would have been tremendous. That would have been my number two after, the Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton. Definitely Frank Reich would have been up there. So I definitely agree with there.
The other point too is it wouldn't be a wholesale change in offense. They implemented the West Coast offense with some different principles, and Hackett just kind of, his scheme got abandoned and it wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
It won't be wholesale changes really to that offense. They'll still have those basic principles of the West Coast. So there's not like a whole new regime change. Reich is from the West Coast style offense. Caldwell will bring in that kind of up tempo when needed. They ran in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning. Yes. So I think it would be a good pairing to get those two minds into the offense and really, really create something special. And then, like I said, Reich might get hired away again down the road before Caldwell will step down. But if he doesn't, I mean, that's a nice transition for an older coach. So I think it would be a great offense. And, and I think both of them are well respected. So, someone in the comments is saying that bring back Munchak for the offensive line. He might be a little bit of bad blood, but with those very respectable coaches like that are well respected around the league, he might say, okay, I'll do it. I'll come back. Someone like that kind of got burned some bridges. So there's a lot to like about Caldwell and Frank Reich combination in my mind. And I think they would probably keep Evero. I think they're smart enough to know that he's an up and coming coach. So that's where I'm at. And, I think that the problem is there's some question marks on this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
That have to be fixed for any coach to succeed. And that's you said it yourself. You got to fix the O-line. Javonte Williams, I loved his running style, but he's a huge question mark. And then you've got possibly bringing back an aging running back in Murray. You've got some other question marks behind him. You had some success, but there's nobody there right now. I mean, they could start the season with an injured running back pretty much and Edmonds. So you've got to address that for the offense. But once those are addressed, I think it's a very, very talented offense that just needs to be put in the right place.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree with you.
Good. I'm glad. So, all right. Well, we've been here at this for about an hour. We really appreciate everyone that came into the chat tonight. We didn't get to everybody. We got into a lot of good discussions. And I really hope that this week we can stop really talking about who the next coach is going to be. And then this next show might be talking about something completely different because the head coach is hired. So that will be something good to look forward this week. And so, Ron, unless you have one other comment, I think we'll wrap this up.
No, I don't think I have anything else. I think we can.
All right.
Again, thank you guys for all of your chats, your comments. It's much appreciated. And hopefully within the next few days, week or two, we will find out who the new coach is of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah. Let's hope it's next week. So, yes. And follow Ron on Twitter, Ron White, NFL. Follow me on Twitter, Thomas Hall, NFL. Give thanks to Scott. You can follow him also on Twitter so we can have some of these discussions in between the week and give us something to talk about. If you guys have some ideas, throw them out there. We'll talk about them on the show so you can join the chat and have a back and forth. So we really appreciate it. And for all of us at Mile High Huddle, thank you very much. And we will see you next Saturday at the same time. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.